We're here today to have a public hearing to discuss our wastewater treatment facility for expansion. And I would like to officially call this hearing to order and recognize the city engineer, Mr. Chris Poget, in order to explain to the public what the details of this project will entail.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are conducting this public hearing today to gather input from the public regarding expansion of the wastewater treatment plant to 1.56 million gallons per day. You will recall we've had this meeting previously to support the environmental information document and gather any comments from the public that might be included in the final report to the Georgia Environmental Protection Division. That report was first conducted back in July of 2017. And the plan then was to discharge the treated effluent into Polecat Branch, which is the creek immediately adjacent to the wastewater treatment plant. Since then, we've had a change in the plan, which resulted in a less restrictive waste load allocation and will result in a less restrictive NPDES permit for the discharge, and that is to pump the treated effluent to Long Swamp Creek rather than Polecat Branch. And that'll alleviate having to do any temperature control and some of the really stringent nutrient control that was going to be in that initial permit. So our firm has gone through the process a second time, not completely rewriting all the reports, but making the revisions showing the changed discharge location. In October of 2017, we revised the environmental review process letters and contacted all the state and federal agencies that need to weigh in on this and had no adverse comments. In June of 2018, we sent a revised anti-degradation review to the Georgia EPD, and you'll recall that report has us go through and does an evaluation of what the cost would be to the city if they tried to do land application for all the additional wastewater rather than putting it back into the creek after being well treated. In June of 18, we also submitted a revised design development report to the EPD, and that report has not been approved yet, but we've already got assurance from the EPD that it is approvable, but we need to have this meeting and this report approved first. There's a sequence that they go in. In November of 2018, we submitted a revised environmental planning document, which is hand in hand with the environmental information document. The council had authorized us to do all these reports not only to support the permitting process with the state of Georgia, but also to support the environmental review process with GFA, with one of the funding agencies, so that you can get a notice of no significant impact, or NONSI, to move the funding process forward. In December of 2018, all the updated documents, literally everything required for the funding and environmental review process has been submitted to EPD. And in January, we scheduled this meeting to finalize the review process and ask for public input. This month after the meeting, we'll submit the minutes of this meeting and any comments received from the public, which may be sparse.
I've got a few questions.
You've got a few questions. We will we'll submit that to EPD, get the NONSI, and then I would expect after that, shortly after that, the state will, GFA will send you any kind of loan documents or contracts, approval of your loan with them. As I mentioned, we're also going down a parallel track with USDA to see what kind of funding package the city can get for that, for the project. Again, the treatment capacity of the proposed expansion will be double the current, so it'll be 1.56 million gallons per day. All the parameters that are going to be included in the permit based on the preliminary waste load allocation are very well within technological limits. And they include phosphorus, total residual chlorine, dissolved oxygen, fecal coliform, ammonia, suspended solids, and biochemical oxygen demand, typical for an NPDES permit. The benefits that have been discussed and we see for discharging into Long Swamp Creek, in addition to the less stringent permit requirements, so that it'll cost less to treat the water. But it also help with the non-depletable flow in the 7Q10, which is the minimum flow that the state requires be maintained in Long Swamp Creek downstream of the city's drinking water intake. So this is actually a win-win, not only for maintaining flow in the stream, but also to potentially allow the city to expand how much water is taken out of the creek for drinking water treatment. The budget for the project is currently, yes, absolutely, is currently $7.5 million. Excuse me, $7.66 million. That is subject to change as if the city makes any additional requests, but we'll go through an underwriting process with both funding agencies where this can be adjusted and agreed upon by not only the funding agency but the city as we move forward, if any of the scope changes. For those of you familiar with the plant, the additions to the plant are going to include an additional aeration basin that mirrors the existing aeration basin, 2 additional final clarifiers that mirror the existing final clarifiers, an expansion of the chlorine contact chamber, an expansion of the filter, effluent filters, tertiary filters, construction of a effluent pump station, and construction of a new sludge holding tank. We discussed briefly that the city might want to look at other options for sludge dewatering. Currently, the operator prefers some dewatering containers. It might make more sense at this scale to have a mechanical sludge press, something that does it more than just gravity and sunshine. So that's something we can look at within the budget. The chemical feed and whatnot will be adjusted a little bit. The city in the new permit's got a pretty low total residual chlorine, 0.04 milligrams per liter, so you're down almost to 40 parts per billion is what kind of chlorine can go back in Long Swamp Creek, which makes sense given the ecology down there. We're going to stick with the chlorine contact chamber rather than ultraviolet light, though, in this case, because of the amount of landfill leachate that the city treats. Ultraviolet disinfection is not especially effective with leachate in the waste stream. So it's important that if we're going to continue to recognize that stream of revenue and what that means to the surrounding community and the landfills that depend on the city, as well as what the city depends on in their water and wastewater budget from the leachate revenue, that we have a process that can accommodate that. So for that reason, we change it. We would anticipate after this process is complete and the city is in the position, has at least one funding offer in hand, if not multiple, that once we're authorized to start design on the project, it would probably be 6 months before plans and specifications are submitted to Georgia EPD for approval, and construction can start shortly thereafter. So a lot of unknowns in the process, but not beyond reason to think that ground could be broken before the end of the year. With that, I will open up for questions from the mayor or the general public.
Anybody from the general public? Dan, questions?
Anything else?
On the leachate, which I know is a big deal all over North Georgia, you put into a special chlorine chamber?
Well, it's not special. It's actually the old way of doing things. So old wastewater plants have chlorine contact chambers. Any city, not just Jasper, but anybody who operates a plant uses chlorine. You have at least 15 minutes of detention time, and all the coliform bacteria, those kind of things are killed before discharge. EPD's new permits now require that you can't have any extra chlorine going out of the plant, hence the 40 parts per billion. So what the city does is dechlorinate. There's other chemicals that you add that react with the chlorine, neutralize it, everything goes out. Some cities don't like the risk of having chemicals all over the plant. It's really not, 1.5 MGD, it's not a large-scale operation here. But larger plants would go to ultraviolet to get away from that altogether, so you don't have chlorine, you don't have to dechlorinate. if you're treating a lot of leachate, LJ County does the same thing, and they've got to stick with chlorine just the same. Treating a lot of leachate, they found through research that leachate, the byproducts of treating leachate, while they're fine to discharge, they're natural chemicals, it inhibits the ultraviolet light's ability to kill the bacteria. So you end up with a lot more light and a lot more power having to be used to be effective.
Any other concerns on the leachate? That as far as just generally going back into lung swamp? But once it's treated, it's safe?
It's good.
Feel confident.
Mary, question? Brandon, question?
Can I ask another question?
Yes.
As far as the physical plant, what people will see when they are going to require any more property, is it going to look drastically larger, or are you just sort of increasing capacity with what you've already got?
It'll be within the same footprint. As a matter of fact, my predecessor, Mr. Turnipseed, when he laid out this plant in 1982, I believe,
Correct.
this was planned for. So there's a lot of piping already in the ground, and we've avoided, on the plant site itself, we've avoided building anything else where these are going to go. So that was
Fortunate for that question, around that property is farmland. It's not for sale, but it could be for the right price, I assume. So we do have room to expand if necessary.
I'm sure the owner there would be overly.
Well, we do have the power condemnation, which we don't want to actually use, but I know the owners of that property, and they'll appreciate that statement. Anything else?
Yeah. With the capacity expansion, how many more, can you break it down for us on how many more homes / businesses / is there any, do you have that number? I know that may be a hard one to answer.
Yeah, not right off the top of my head, because usage patterns are changing, but it's literally going to be double what the current capacity is. So
Okay.
I can give you a little insight. We're presently about 80%, 75–80% of our capacity, about 0.8. And you can pretty much look at the city. We have some septic in the city. There's a few homes, several homes, depending on the outer line areas that's on septic, but mostly on sewer. And this will be able to double the size of the city of Jasper commercially. And something I'd like to say, Chris, excellent job. I'm going to tell you that before Dan had these questions, because I was going to ask most of these questions, and Dan's done a good job asking them, so I'm pretty much done, except to give a little insight, if you will. Watershed assessment. This is when this started, and that particular law that was passed that required local governments and water authorities and whatever else to do a watershed assessment back in the 90s. And I recall going to the Capitol and going, oh my goodness, we've got to go through all of this before we can actually apply for a wastewater permit. And actually at the time, it was, I felt like the state of Georgia's effort in order to control the growth in North Georgia by saying, you won't get a permit because you don't have a stream capacity, we need to do a watershed assessment. It cost several $1,000s, almost over $100,000 to the city of Jasper, maybe way more than that, to do a watershed assessment, which we did through our RDC at the time.
With the partnership, the Northwest Georgia Partnership. That's right.
But that was when this started, and we'll always work toward the date that we would, I guess, bite the bullet and talk about this kind of money, because if we did not get the customers, if we don't double the size of our economy in the city of Jasper or our growth, we're looking at doubling the rates on the citizens of Jasper, and that's what we've held up in the past. We were ready to pull the trigger on this around 2006, 2007, and backed away because of the downturn in the economy.
Right.
A couple things I want to bring out is that's going to be addressed, and because I got hit on this after one of our council meetings when it was discussed about Long Swamp Creek. And I told the particular person who asked me, who just happened to be a developer, who was concerned about this discharge going from Polecat Creek, which is always Polecat Branch, whatever you want to refer to it as, to Long Swamp, because it's going to now tell people that the city is discharging into a stream now that goes by their home, and the old adage that it's fine that you do it to someone else but not in my backyard. So we're gonna have probably a room full of people once we get down the road wanting to know, why are you discharging in in Long Swamp? And when I sat in my office with Mr. Hall trying to come up with these ideas, we really didn't think about the not in my backyard that we will experience. Because this, people now don't realize that a lot of discharge comes out of bent tree, and I think we have another discharge that comes out of Sharp Mountain, the assembly up around Sharp Top. But this is something that people have to understand, because if we don't do this or get a land application permit, that we won't be able to meet any of these, most of these requirements if we discharge where it's presently at. And the fact that you mentioned that we would be able to maybe get a water rate increase if we discharge 1 million gallons a day back into Long Swamp, during drought conditions, that would be very handy and appropriate. But I want to let it be known that we will have public hearings on this, and we will have public comments, but there will be a lot of feedback to our people, our customers, that if we don't do this, people want to control growth in Jasper. Don't allow this to happen, because when we run out of sewer, and if we don't borrow this money to build our wastewater treatment or expand our wastewater treatment plant, that's when you stop the growth in the city of Jasper. Because without a sewer facility, you won't get 515 to develop, and we'll continue paying higher taxes or whatever, or water rates, because we don't have the growth to coincide with it. And I'm about done, man. I think I pretty much wanted to say good job.
How much discharge do you think will be back into Long? I mean, I've seen your current discharge into Polecat, and it's not a tremendous amount of fluid. Do you think there would be 1 million gallons a day discharge?
In the future, it would be. It can reach that number. But we're going to also continue. Chris left some leeway for some change orders and different approaches. Well, let me ask you this. Will we be able, with our new permit to discharge into Long Swamp, will we be able to continue to discharge what we are presently into Polecat?
I don't think you'll have any incentive to do that.
But it would be there if we needed it, possibly, couldn't it?
You'd have to maintain a second permit and a second set of sampling. We're going to treat to the level that needs to go into.
Okay, well, I just thought it might be handy if the pumps were not working, or we could discharge, had a permit into an existing stream that we've used for 50 years, say 100 years, no, 75 years. Just thought.
I know that your current discharge is, I believe you and Mr. Hall once told me, clean enough y'all would almost drink out of it, but neither one of you would when we were out there that day.
It's not something you really would want to do.
Is it still roughly that clean?
There have been, Chris can tell you, there have been operators that have done it, but it's not advisable.
How clean is the discharge?
It'll actually be cleaner than current. The new permit will be, and it's, it's all relative. All this is multiple times cleaner than it was in the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Good way to answer that. I would rather drink the water coming out of the wastewater treatment plant than the stream coming from the city of Jasper. I guarantee you'll find less in the water than you will the water that's been non-source points would probably give you more bacteria than you would get out of the treatment plant.
I noticed you're discharging downstream of your intake. Is that because you don't want it upstream?
We prefer not to have to deal with it, but people would probably appreciate that a little bit more. But we do want to count that as part of our discharge going to the Etowah.
Yeah, it compounds it a little bit if you discharge above the impoundment, because the stream's not flowing at that point. I mean, it's flowing, but it slows down. So the quicker we can get it flowing, falling over rocks, things like that, naturally aerated, the better. And
the fact that we don't have to put it into our withdrawal areas is a good feeling. To answer your question the same way, Molly, would you want to drink this or not? But like by the time it gets to sandy bottoms, it'd be very negative. Wouldn't be able to find it.
No trace. Right.
No trace by sandy bottoms.
I think for that time. I'm not an engineer, but I did spend a night in Hobby Express.
I think your water quality would be the same as it is today. Just almost right downstream. We've done some assimilation studies and we discharge into primary trout streams further in North Georgia.
Okay.
No issues whatsoever.
Any other questions? Chris, thank you so much. And with no other business, we will entertain a motion to adjourn, and I will do that.